thank you for being here. Welcome to the JDC West 2016 International Business Case Presentation. So first off, I'd just like to thank our judges. We have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kazar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Corp, and Carolyn Tastad from P&G. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
Mr. McMadams and team, thank you so much for having us today. Today you've come to us with a really interesting question and a lot of decisions that you have to make. So I want you to imagine that you're on a crossroad. This direction is one that you're kind of familiar with, and going this direction looks a little bit patchy and you're a little bit unfamiliar with it, but at the end, looks like there's a land of a lot of prosperity and excellence. Then in this case, which one do you choose? And today, we believe that when you're faced with this question, you have two options, and that one that we think you should go with is to pivot. You don't have to completely change the way you operate, but rather grant one foot on the ground and pivot to the direction that you think will give you the prosperity going forward for your company. So I'm here with my team today. We're DNA Consulting. These are my colleagues, Debir, Nil, and my name is Angela. So first, let's have a look at the analysis that we've done for you before we take you through the recommendation that we've come up with you, and also the implementation plan that we've outlined for your success going forward. So when you have a look at the industries that you're in currently, the one main takeaway is that there has been huge growth in the aviation industry, which you serve as your clients. It's grown almost twice as much within the last 10 years, and really mainly this growth has been driven by the emerging markets that are coming around the world, and we've seen this, and we've seen you capitalize on this growth opportunity as you grew into different parts of South America as well as Asia. So we know that emerging markets have a lot of opportunities. So then we know how you operate currently. Currently, you are a neutral system integrator that provides excellent service. But we also know that and these are why you have been able to achieve the success that you have of achieving about $2.2 million in revenue. And one thing that we really want to highlight here is that your success comes from your ability to remain neutral. This differentiates you from different competitors in the market. Because you're neutral and you're objective, you're able to provide your clients with what integration service and really able to consult them on what is best for them. So this is one key part of your value proposition that you should really keep in mind going forward. So then looking at your current business model, we know that you're basically the liaison party in between the supplier and the customers. But one option that you've been presented with today is a new potential business model, which would be for you to become the middle person, to also provide not only just liaise, but provide the software, hardware, as well as the integrations services. And this really refers to the unfamiliar path that I was referring to before. You haven't really taken this path before of offering this service, but we do believe that is where the large opportunities lay, and that there are ways for you to minimize the risks that you might face when you choose to go down that path. here is the overall issue that we see today. How can your company grow going forward while you maintain the integrity of your business? And there's really 3 decision criteria that we've outlined. The first is, should your company pursue another line of business? And we think, yes, you should, because there's a lot of opportunities in the emerging markets. The second is, then in that case, which RFP opportunities of the 3 that are outlined for you should you pursue? And lastly, once we've identified which one you should pursue, how can you actually go forward with the plan and make sure you succeed in the RFP's pursuit and win? And our overall recommendation for you today is, again, to pivot. And really this means for your company to expand into Africa by pursuing the Oman RFP opportunity. And we believe that this will allow your company to capitalize on the emerging markets, and you'll be able to profit around $300,000 and really enjoy and expand your revenue of $2.2 million just within the first year. So now my colleague Debir will go through the alternatives that are presented to you and the decision criteria that we've used to come to the recommendation.
So as Angela outlined, you're at a pivot. And there's 3 countries that you could pivot to. The first is Angola, the second is Burundi, and the third is Oman. And we've based our decision on 3 main criteria. First being NPV, the second being the country's potential. Do you want to be in this country? Do you want to expand this country? Is this the country that you want to have a foothold overseas in? And the final criteria is legality. This is our biggest issue. Whatever you do, wherever you expand, your integrity is of utmost importance. Whatever you do needs to be legal. Diving into the 3, what we can see off the top is that the first 3 have all positive NPVs on a benefit basis. But we also know that if you want to expand into a new country or expand into a new region, you're going to need some setup costs. You're going to need a new office. You're going to need a consultant out there. If you really want to be in the countries, you're going to need a foothold. And that actually generates a cost of about $2.5 million on a 5-year NPV basis. Looking at those, the first option of Angola is actually infeasible. It doesn't generate you a positive NPV, and it actually generates a loss of about 1.9 million in an NPV basis. So that recommendation off the top cannot be achieved. The next 2 are Burundi and Oman. Both have positive NPVs that are slightly different, but they differ on the country potential standpoint. We've identified Oman as the better country to go into, specifically based on its diversification. We know that Angola is currently based on oil revenue. A lot of their revenue is generated from oil, a lot of their growth will be generated from oil going forward. However, we also know that commodities as a whole are in an economic downturn, and that entering a country that is based on oil revenue and hoping to grow prosperity in that country isn't probably the safest bet. But we also know Oman is diversifying into infrastructure away from its oil business and actually has a more robust economic portfolio. That way, if you're expanding into a country such as that, it would be a good foothold to make sure that the country as a whole is stable as you move in. But the main issue that we want to talk about here is legality. Each country comes with what we call a service cost. It's a cost of doing business in the country. And there's a question of whether that service cost is legal in the country that you're going into. We've actually looked at the 3 types of service costs, Angola being a consulting cost, Burundi being a cash payment to officials, and Oman being an airport construction cost, and whether each of those costs are legal. In Angola specifically, they're asking for a consulting cost. And although this could be legal, as it's not actually being paid to a direct foreign official, the biggest red flag that we see is that there is no official documentation of this transaction. So if they say this cost is going to a consulting service, but somehow ends up in the hands of a foreign official, and you don't have any documentation on your end to protect yourself, you're legally liable. You can't plead that you didn't know. You can't plead that this wasn't your line of business. It is your due diligence to make sure that the costs are going where they're allocated to. And if you don't have documentation, you can't prove that. Angola is not possible. The second is Burundi. And Burundi, they're asking for cash payments to officials. Now, this is a gray area. Cash payments to officials are allowed if and only if it's in the regular line of business. The main problem that we see here, though, is that setting up a new business isn't always classified in a regular line of business. Setting up a new business can be classified as that, or it can be classified as a bribe to push processes further and expedite yourself into a country. Once again, that could be 14 years in jail by going to Burundi because of a simple misinformation of what those costs actually meant. Burundi is not an option. The final option that we're looking at is Oman. And Oman has asked for costs to go to airport construction. This isn't actually going to a foreign official. This is going to a third party who simply said that as a part of a contract, we want you to also pay for a bit of airport constructions that are in a similar line of business. There are also the official documentation, there is a plan, there are blueprints to specify that your costs are not going to foreign officials. These are not bribes, these are not expediting your process in an unethical manner. It's simply a cash incentive to a different business to allow your RFP to take place. This is also built into the RFP. The amount of money that you will spend are built into the blueprints. This, by all means, is legal. It's a bit different than what you're used to doing business in Canada, but it is by no means illegal. This is legally viable. And going off that, Oman fits all three categories. It is NPV positive, it has a potential for growth, and it is the only legal opportunity of the three. Therefore, going forward, we believe that Oman is not only the best recommendation, it is the only recommendation that you have available. So, our recommendation is to expand into Africa through Oman, and we have three pillars of this. One is the government. The first thing you need to do is secure that AR insurance that you're so worried about. Yeah, we believe that Oman is a stable country, but we don't know that the parties that you're dealing with will actually end up paying you in the end. That is a risk for you. But by going to the EDC and establishing some AR insurance, accounts receivable insurance, you can ensure that even if those parties don't pay you, you will still be compensated for the infrastructure that you're building. The second is the due diligence process, and that simply means performing due diligence on Oman as a whole going forward. The second pillar of our recommendation is flight. We want you to approach flight with an alternative proposal. They've told you that they don't want to be involved in any expansion overall. They're going to sell you your product, and you're going to implement it in another country. We've identified that their main concern is legality, and we've identified that this is also a legal recommendation, so no worries there. But the main worry is in the installation of those technologies. You're a consulting firm. You don't know how to install technologies in airplanes. That's not your field. That's not your forte. So we're simply saying go back to flight and tell them that, okay, fine, we will take the product off your hands, but we want to contract you for the installation. Have them do the installation, eliminate that risk off your hands. Focus on what you do best, dealing with parties, interacting with people, and creating transactions and making those happen. And the final pillar of a recommendation is an RFP process. You only have a couple hours to listen to, and you need to look at the terms and the construction costs of what this is going to be, and overall identify how you're going to best win this RFP over any competitor. And by doing this, you can win your RFP successfully and expand overseas in the most efficient manner. And to quickly look at what our recommendation is going to generate you, we believe, based on the projections that you've provided, that Oman will generate you $52 million in revenue by 2019. You're at $2.2 million in revenue, so this is a massive expansion. And as well, based on the margins you've provided as well, we believe that the profit off this expansion will be $3.7 million in 2019. This is a huge potential for your company. This is a massive potential for your company. The profit that you will generate off this recommendation is larger than the revenue your company is making as a whole right now.
So today we've taken you through the options that you have, the paths that are laid out in front of you. And we've identified that yes, this path looks a little bit unfamiliar and foreign to you, but there's a lot of potential down there. But really, what do you need to do to take the right steps to get there? You need to know which pitfalls are possibly there and really learn how to navigate through those and really learn how to implement the strategy that we have for you. And that's what my colleague Neil will do now to take you through the implementation.
Because we do realize that the path is long and that you have a relatively short period of time to cross it to submitting that RFP with your 3-hour deadline. So first, we want to focus on the 3 meetings that we believe need to happen over the next 3 hours to make sure that the RFP is ready to be submitted with the recommendations that we've made. And the first focuses on the EDC meeting that's happening in about an hour. And here we want to first broach the subject that you've brought up, which is securing that AR insurance. So looking into whether that AR insurance is possible and what the probability is that you secure it and what the costs are. We've currently built in the 2.5% margin that will be taken off of the total contract that you've projected. However, we know given the projected revenues that you'd be willing to actually burden a cost higher than that should the risk be in excess of what the average contract should be. And so looking at what that cost might be and what the timeline for that is crucial in making sure that you can secure that insurance. And the second is using this opportunity to actually begin that due diligence process, because the EDC is one of the best stakeholders to know whether Oman is a country that has problems, because your company is neither the first nor the last to do business in Oman, and so they would be willing, or they would be able to tell you whether any problems have arisen with previous Canadian companies that have gone into Oman, and whether you should be wary of any other red flags that you can mitigate going forward that are large problems. And here specifically, we've outlined that should the risk of failure, so should the risk of default and not payment be greater than 5%, that you should seriously consider whether Oman is a safe country. Our information currently tells us that this is not a large risk and that this shouldn't come up, but we've added this in as a key indicator of whether there is a red flag. Next is the flight meeting. So here's where the renegotiation needs to happen, given the counterproposal that you were given a few hours ago. So the first thing that we'd like to focus on is for your company to go in prepared. So we've drafted a few terms that we'd like to include in a new service agreement with FIGHT, and we believe that if you go in with these terms and with these conditions, that you can quickly move this agreement forward. So specifically, we're looking at projecting a minimum number of units that they would be able to service over the 3 years that they would have the exclusivity contract with you, to make sure that they're secure in the revenues that would be coming in, as well as giving them an incentive to actually go forward with this project. So we know that there isn't a risk for your company in terms of legality, and so first we need to communicate that in both the tone and the messaging. However, we believe that given the margins that you have in this project, that you would be actually able to give up the $4,500 that they were able to offer to you as a fee to them to do the servicing that cost them about $4,000. And we believe that by going in with such a strong proposal, that you can close the secondary contractual agreement quickly, so that you can go into the final stages prepared to submit the RFP to Oman. Which takes us to this final stage. What changes need to actually be made to the current contract with Oman so that you can submit the RFP? And the first is the alteration of the cost. So this might not be included in the actual documents, but we want in the due diligence process to have the $4,500 that you would be paying for the servicing, and that is a third-party contract included in the agreement, to make sure that all parties are aware of how the services are being rendered and that where they are being rendered from. Second are the actual terms of the agreement. So we believe, given some of your concerns around whether payments can be made, that you can add a contingent term in the actual agreement, so that the approval by them is still contingent on you receiving AR insurance. So that should that insurance not come through, which would validate high concerns about this project, you would have the ability to withdraw the actual RFP. Again, we don't believe that this is possible, but that we believe that this is an appropriate safety net, given that you're going into an uncharted territory. And last but not least are the construction costs. So because we believe that the construction costs are legal, we want to do everything that we can to ensure that your company has the documentation to back up that legality. So this includes having in the agreement itself that this is going to that project specifically, and then having an invoice of what the exact costs are that total up to the amount that is in your contract, and documenting all of this along with the blueprints that you already have, should those records ever be requested, that you have them on hand and that you can provide them. And that by writing these into the actual RFP as terms of the contract, that there's no ambiguity about what's happening, and that there's no issues that arise after the project begins its completion. So this is the first 3 stages. This is what needs to happen over the next 3 hours to make sure that you can submit that RFP, but there's more that needs to be done once that RFP is actually accepted. And these include secondary due diligence on what the services will actually be, on the preliminary setup of the infrastructure that you're going to need to support a project of this size, as well as the actual execution that involves some of the hiring. And here we recognize that there is a large upfront investment that needs to be made in an office in the Africa Middle East region in order to support projects like this and more in the future. And that this cost we're currently estimating at around $550,000 for one permanent consultant that has the expertise, as well as the administrative cost of an assistant and a location to actually run projects of this size. And that as you go forward and add more projects, this cost will increase likely to $750,000 per year to support up to 4 staff members. And that once the project is approved, you can begin to hire all of these members. And that these stages will take place over the next 3 to 6 months, and that we will continue to keep track of the progression over the next 3 years. And so specifically, I want to draw your attention to when we believe that the actual execution will take place, which is at the end of the first year, which is when the first installation will likely take place, given the approval of the RFP, and then when we actually believe the reevaluation will take place, given some of the uncertainties about what the numbers will be going into 2019 in terms of installations. We want your company to continue to reevaluate what the projections are in terms of development so that you can keep on pace with that growth. And that's actually one of the key risks that we've identified is that future progression.
So you're in an industry where connectivity is really important, and we believe by taking the path that we've recommended for you and working with us, you'll be able to achieve excellence. Thank you.
So thank you, judges. If you have any questions.
Do you mind just speculating what you think the risks would be with going with the revised contract proposal with Flight? And just say they agree. What are my risks as a result of that? Just speculating.
So we actually believe that your risks are minimal. So the key risks that would come up are any of the legal issues, whether you would be able to actually render those services, given that you're now going with 2 separate contracts. You would have to deal with any issues that arise from 2 separate contracts, which we believe is a small concern, but not anything large. And that anything that's built into the original RFP is of minimal risk. And so given that you've already worked with Flight as a service provider and as an equipment provider, and that they're a key partner for you, and given some of the contingencies that we're going to build into the RFP contract, we don't believe that there are any large risks with splitting those 2 services up and renegotiating those terms.
Mike has choices right now. We're not exclusive. And if they're not, do you think they might have some concern about eliminating 2 of the 3 RFPs that they'd like to bid on right now? And is that a risk for our success in this relationship?
To address that, actually, they've expressed some concerns about the legality and stability of those RFPs individually. So it seems from our end like they actually kind of want to back out and put the risk entirely on you. From the concern on their end, what we're actually allowing you to do is we're actually allowing you to pursue options that they seem like they didn't want to pursue it in the first place, and also offering them to do a line of their regular business as a part of that service completely risk-free. So in terms of your relationship, I think it actually strengthens it. It's saying that we are confident in you and your abilities, as well as we're allowing you to do what you do best, and we are identifying what's legal and what's not, and we'll take on that risk ourselves.
Can I ask a question relative to the legal risk that you've assessed? How confident are you in that, and what if you're wrong?
So we're actually quite confident in our assessment. We've taken a look at the 5 relevant terms of that law that are applicable to this specific case, and we've identified that in all of those 5 terms, that this specific payment of construction costs does not qualify as either a bribery or in what would not qualify as in the general line of business. And so we're actually quite confident in our evaluation of the legality of this proposal. However, as a contingency going forward, it's why we've recommended that you do work with the EDC, is because in their approval of your AR security, they themselves will do due diligence, and so they themselves will raise any additional concerns should they arise. And given that you have a contingency that you can withdraw your bid should you not receive that AR security, if that concern comes up and you cannot secure that security, you can actually withdraw your bid. So we believe that the risk overall is extremely low.
The company here is actually very good at technology. You said almost nothing about technology. You talked about opening up a new market. there nothing to do about the technology itself that should be part of this conversation?
Technology is a very important part of this conversation, but what we've assessed here is really the concern with the RFP and the conversation that's coming up in 3 hours is not centered around technology, but rather it's about the opportunities that are presented to you and which one you should really pursue and how you can make sure that it succeeds. However, technology is very important, and we do believe that the supplier that you're trying to work with, Flight, has a very unique technology in being able to provide real-time data, and it's very timely in that it aligns with the public's concern about airline securities and with the events that happen.
If Flight doesn't want to renegotiate your terms, what should we do? What should we do? They don't want to go forward with it.
So, a couple things. One, we actually believe that chance is minimal, simply because Flight's main contention was the legality risk, and you've actually eliminated that on their end. So the possibility of them not wanting to go through with an additional revenue stream, as you are giving them more money than their cost is, seems quite minimal. If they do not want to go forward with it, I believe you could also renegotiate that contract as well and offer them a higher price as well, and simply reemphasize the fact that it is legal. And given the fact that the NPV is quite positive, we've actually identified for some sensitivities that show that even with higher costs or even with lower demand, both of them still provide NPV positive projects. And we don't see why a company that's blind to install and provide their services would want to back out of such an opportunity, given you've eliminated the risk and provided them with more money.